Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the Arc of Thoughts podcast. Again, we're in a different setting today, Kasim. Um, Today's episode, we're talking about drugs, alcohol, and vaping. That were not going to be the only topics that we're going to restrict ourselves to. In general, we're talking about addictions. Now, all of these things, they have individual impacts. So, a person who involves themselves within the taking of these substances, uh, there's individual problems that occur to that person and their health and their bodies and the way that they may look after themselves, both in terms of physically as well as mentally as well as spiritually as well, right?
And economically.
And economically. But as well as that, they also have societal impacts as well. The more people who are involved in such situations or in such circumstances, unfortunately, not only are they going to be having an impact on terms of their own individual lives, but they're going to be affecting the lives of their family members around them, the lives of their friends. And we're talking about those friends who are involved with them in the use of these substances, as well as those friends who don't use these substances. Um, so let's get started. I think what we'll do is we'll go sort of in terms of starting off with lighter substances, and we'll make our way through towards more heavier substances, as well as talking about the impacts that they have within society and on the individual themselves. Um, Obviously, it's probably sort of very important to mention here is that the more stronger the substance, the less people are obviously naturally going to be using a substance of that caliber. For example, the amount of people.
Some may differ with you on that one, but yeah.
Well, the amount of people that vape, right, in comparison to somebody that's using something like heroin, I hope there's more people. Like, if we're going to compare, I hope there's more people that
Yeah,
are
that's our
vaping.
two evils, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, that's a really important point as well. Whilst we're talking about these substances, we're talking about the use of these substances starting afresh or gradually building them up. At the end of the day, for me personally, I don't know about yourself, right? If there's somebody who is out there abusing heroin and they come down to smoking a joint, right? Then you can see that it's slow. Well, the hope is that that person, the reason why they're doing that is they want to come down away from the substance that they are abusing, and they want to come away from that. Now, we're not talking about those kind of situations, and we're not particularly too interested, at least in this episode, talking about that. In the future, maybe we might have somebody on as a guest who is involved in community work to help those who abuse drugs, and maybe they can tell us about the process of coming away from more harmful drugs or drugs of a high caliber and coming down and coming away. What we're talking about here is youth or young people who unfortunately who fortunately have never had access to anything, and all of a sudden they're working their way up the ladder. So let's get started. Let's start with, and sometimes these things aren't seen as drugs, right? Cigarettes, shisha, and vaping. That's where we'll start the conversation. First question is like, I think some people unfortunately don't see these substances as substances which are harmful. I think we'll get into this conversation as well um, about legalization as well and whether the state should intervene or not, right? But smoking, I mean, you've already mentioned economical impact, right? Um, as well as physical impact is very well known about cigarettes and how it harms a person individually. For example, smoking is well known to be a factor in the cause of lung cancer. This is very well documented, and it has taken place over a period of many years in which the studies that have been formed by scientists, by doctors, they've eventually come to the conclusion they've realized, okay, smoking is causing lung cancer, right? Um,
You're always gonna get one smart ass out there. He's gonna say, "Oh, my uncle used to smoke 40 fags a day, and when he stopped smoking, he died." That'd be that one person. But yeah, carry on. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. If you're that one person, just go watch something else.
um, so these, like, cigarette, we know is well known. We're not just talking like on a individual level. We're not just talking about like it's common knowledge amongst people. Even the government are pushing this, that smoking is bad for an individual, and yet if I wanted to go buy a pack of cigarettes from the shop, I can just walk up to the shop, rock up with however much it's going to cost me, and I can buy. Right? What do you think about that? Like, I think the thing is here is that we've taken this as a norm. We've
It's
taken
become
this as
normal, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's become
We've
normal.
taken this as yeah, it's normal, right? But should it be normal,
The obvious answer is no.
right?
the the question we need to answer is that why is it normal?
Mm-hmm.
Wh- All it is I can see is that people are benefiting economically.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that businesses are earning a lot of money, mashallah, there's people earning a lot of money. That's all I can see why it's still legal. And the government has no hand in that. That'd be funny to see, because at the end of the day, anything which is harming your society, harming the individuals who live in your country,
Mm-hmm.
you'd want that thing to be taken away from that country. But
Mm.
unfortunately, it's not.
But here's the thing, though, Kasim, right? Just because something is bad for you, does that necessarily mean that the state should intervene to stop you? I'm talking about you, but I mean in general, that you should be stopped from having that thing.
Personally, yeah. If
So
you have the power to implement something which is going to be for the benefit of the greater good,
mhm,
not for the benefit of a few people, because I actually don't know the statistic of how many people smoke, but just out of 10 people, just say 4 smoke and 6 don't.
mhm.
For the greater good of the 6 people, you would stop it.
Okay,
Why? Because long term, it'll have a better effect for your society.
okay.
If you have that power, if you have that control, why wouldn't you stop it?
So I think this is like a really interesting topic to get into, and this is like sort of going a bit of a tangent away from the original topic, but I want to explore this a bit with you then. So, at what point do you stop taking things away from people or from society because it causes harm? Because there's many things that are harmful, right?
Yeah.
Um, at what point do you decide, okay, here's the line to say, right, okay, you, the society, the state is allowed to do this particular thing or is allowed to have this thing, um,
Right.
or not?
So my own perspective would be you'd have to, depending on the state of your society, depending on how long something has been there, you have to be in with lot of wisdom. So
Hmm.
let's just talk about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made, for example, alcohol haram. It
Hmm.
wasn't just in one stage. It didn't send a revelation and said tomorrow, okay, it's all. No, it was done in stages.
Hmm.
So people had the time and the ability to wean off it slowly, slowly. So you'd have to do it in stages. You wouldn't be able to just go cold turkey. That's if your
Yeah.
society has been, how do you say, they habituated to something.
Mm.
You can't just take it away. First, you have to put in measures, and you have to take it away slowly through steps. And but at the same time, you need education. You need to educate your people why we're slowly putting limits on stuff. I
Mm.
wouldn't say take it away straight away.
Yeah.
No, that'd be stupid.
So on this point, I agree with you. I don't think the government are in a position where they can immediately take away. And I'm going to mention something here now, and it's going to come into the discussion a bit later on as well. That um, if you look back in the 1950s or so, right, it was very very common for doctors, and that time because the knowledge wasn't well known, it was very common for doctors to prescribe or to give the advice to patients that had problems with their lungs to go smoke. So the doctor would literally say to you, right, go buy some cigarettes and have a smoke. And the reason was because the initial intake of the tobacco would sort of relieve the airways and stuff, right? And obviously, this has been debunked. We now realize that actually no, that was completely the wrong advice to give. Um, but because of its prevalence, it became very difficult for things like this to be taken away. And where I agree with you is obviously we can't immediately make things go cold turkey. You can't pull the plug. The example is given of prohibition in America, right? Compare that with prohibition in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the
So,
Sahaba, where in America, when alcohol was taken away from the people, all they did was instead of going through it in a legal manner, everything went basically into back alleys and
the black
underground
market,
basements
basically, yeah.
and the black market, and people found their ways to get hold of what they wanted. The same is going to basically happen in this sort of situation as well, where it doesn't for me, the way that I see it is it doesn't matter whether you legalize or make something illegal to the vast majority of people. To other people, yeah, who have a moral understanding and want to stick within the legal framework, um they the law has to outline what is good and bad for them. But for others, I don't think so. Where I where I see it and where I see the problem is, unfortunately, the state is not involved in the education of the people of its country to teach them or to show them what is right and what is wrong.
But then that goes back to the point of why they're not involved in them sort of things.
Yeah,
Which comes back to what is an economic benefit.
yeah. Potentially, or they just want to leave people to rot.
Yeah, that's
There's no
another.
care, isn't there?
Again, that's another evil.
Right?
That's another harm. That's not a good
Yeah,
thing on the side of the government, is it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I think like progressing the conversation, then we talked about like cigarettes and legality of cigarettes, and I think for me,
Honestly, at the moment they're bloody expensive.
yeah, well,
I think when we were young, about £5 a packet.
right,
I think now, I'm not lying. I think I went to the shop a few weeks ago. Somebody buy something about £10, £11 for a packet.
okay,
I think that's nuts, and they'll go through one or two a day.
yeah. But like I said, I think the problem that arises with things like cigarettes is because of their prevalence and like for how long no information was known about them. That's why they've remained legal, right? And the sort of comparison that I want to make now is with vaping.
Okay.
Because we are in the same situation as what it was like maybe 50 years ago, where we don't have much information on the effects of vaping on the individual person, right? There are some studies that have been done, and there are many doctors who claim that vaping has led to lung conditions. There are It's very quick. If you just Google online, you can find like X-rays of a person's lung that has been taken, where the lungs have now become filled with fluid, which should not have been there, and the lungs are being destroyed basically. But within the same situation now, what I want to sort of mention here is, you see, problems that arise within a human or within an individual take time to manifest. It's not just going to be you vape one day and the next day automatically your body is going to shut down and you're going to have all of these problems. No, no, no. It takes time to develop, right? And that's why science requires time for that thing to manifest itself as well. But if we don't cut an issue that we know is going to have problems, whilst there may not be like a large flurry of scientific information, right? This podcast will go on YouTube. Within 5 years, 10 years, I can guarantee you there are going to be studies that are going to exist with a large number of people where vaping is being shown to be bad for an individual's physical health, right? And this is the problem, that many people within our society aren't astute enough to think like this. That's my opinion, right? Because they're not thinking like, if they're vaping, they're thinking that I'm only inhaling water vapor, whereas in actuality, what you're inhaling is you have no idea. Whilst I say I think like 4,000 to 8,000 chemicals exist within a cigarette, I'm fairly sure the chemicals which exist within the e-cigs are not far off that number.
So I remember a lot of people when vaping's been around, what, 10 years? 10 years?
Yeah, I'd say.
I
Yeah,
don't remember because I don't smoke and stuff like that. But I remember when they first came out, people said to us the reason why we're vaping and we're not smoking anymore because it's going to take us off the cigarettes. No, it just led you to another addiction.
I think the other thing that you're right there, but I think that what was worse was, when you have a cigarette, right?
Go on, I know you're going to say, but carry on.
Right. When somebody has a cigarette, they go outside or wherever they go, right, to have their cigarette. Once that cigarette finishes, it's finished.
Yeah.
You find very few people, unless somebody's got a very heavy addiction, right? You find very few people who will turn around, go back into their pocket, get another fag out, light it, and smoke another one.
Well, you can't, because it's illegal anyway in most places.
Right. Yeah. But I mean outside, right? Even outside, right? It's very, very rare that you see somebody smoke multiple in a row. Whereas with vaping now,
it's with you all the time.
There's no like cut point of this session is over. Do you get me? And
because the fag break is literally 5 minutes.
Yeah. Or like I said, like the fag finishes. Right. But in this case, like it just keeps on going, right? So in comparison, let's say for example, a person smokes, and one cigarette has maybe 10 puffs.
Possibly.
10 puffs, right? If you're having 10, 15 a day, that's 100 to 150 puffs, right? I remember there was a teacher who came to me, who teaches in a local Islamic school that's close to us. And he came to me and he said to me, listen, I've got a serious question and I need some understanding about this. I said, what's up? So he goes to me, I've got children in my classroom who I'm teaching, maybe between the ages of like 10 to 15, right? And they've got these e-cigs with them constantly. So he said that, I just like asked them about, what they're doing, what they're smoking and things like that, and how often they're smoking. He said that the child mentioned that he was smoking approximately 300 puffs a day, right? Now, we know, Kasim, human psychology, natural, right? If you know that you're doing something wrong and somebody senior asks you about that, do you under or overestimate?
You underestimate.
You underestimate in it. It's like when we were younger, right? And you've bought something, and your dad asks you how much did you pay for that? You buy like a new T-shirt or you buy a new jacket. Your dad asks you how much did you pay for that, or you buy some new trainers, right? Your dad asks you how much did you pay for that? Cost about 70, 80 quid, and you turn around and say, "Yeah, I bought it on sale for 35." you know?
And he goes,
Yeah.
my son. This is how I raised him.
Yeah. But you underestimate. So this kid has said that he puffs 300 times a day. That's an underestimate, right? We've not even got into the child who is a developing child who's still growing, the effect that he's doing to his body. And this teacher who was saying to me, he said, "Look, what can I do? There's nothing that I can do, right? Because if I confiscate it, I've got to give it back to him at the end of the day anyway, right? What can I do to teach this child? What can I do to tell him that this is something that's bad for you because of how prevalent that has become? You know, this kid probably goes home, and unfortunately, there's probably family members that are using e-cigs and vaping as well.
Yeah.
It's not seen as like a taboo. Like, I remember when we were younger, right? We used to have uncles and aunties that might have smoked. Uncles, right? Within our community, very rare for women to smoke. But we used to have uncles that used to smoke, but they would step outside to have their cigarette because the thing is, it was seen as like this is not something you should do in front of a kid.
Yeah. They had some shame about it.
Yeah.
And even if you asked them what you were doing, they would never tell you what they were doing.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
no,
just going
go
outside for some fresh air. Yeah.
You understand that when you got older, you understood what that meant, what fresh air meant.
Yeah.
But even then, there was that sense of shame, as you're mentioning, which is important.
Yeah.
But if that goes like the Hadith Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you don't have any shame, do whatever you want.
Mm.
Wallah, do whatever you want. There's no limits.
Yeah.
How sad is it? We're gonna get onto this, but Muslim kids we're talking about now, they say that I smoke with my father, stuff like this is the reality. But I smoke weed with my father, we drink together, we do this sort of stuff. It's a sad reality, isn't it? And at the end of the day, even these vapes, I won't be surprised if the parents are buying the actual vapes for their children. Why? Just to keep them quiet. Why? Because it's a way of just pleasing their kids. And then there goes to that point of the kids getting out of control, and you can't stop them, and they're addicted to other stuff, which you're going to get onto. And there's honestly no. Not saying there's no hope, but it's very, very hard to come back from that.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to leave like a link to, I think the YouTube channel is called the Institute of Human Anatomy. A couple of guys from America, and they've done like um, a really good video talking about vaping and the problems that exist within it. They talk about something known as, I think it's vitamin E acetate, which is a key component that exists within these e-cigarettes and the harm that it causes. Whilst it's called vitamin, doesn't necessarily mean it's something that's good. Take the example of vitamin K, for example, right? So, okay, I don't know if is there anything else that you want to mention
One
on
thing,
like vaping
this is
culture?
just disclaimer. We're not saying that vaping and e-cigs are haram and stuff like that. But if you are involved in either smoking, buying and selling, or you're in this business, I would highly recommend that you go to a scholar and ask them, is your income halal or not? We're not going to answer that, and we're not even going to mention anything, but that would be a disclaimer. Go ask. And is this even permissible to even do? Just from the aspect, not even your health, just of you wasting money on stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. And the thing is, like I said, because the information isn't out there wide scale, the information is out there that is bad for you, right? Originally, the way that it sort of crept into society was it was the gateway to coming away from cigarettes.
Yeah.
But now it's basically just taken over and become part of culture.
It's become another business.
Yeah. And I think this is the point that we've lost sort of sight of what it was originally meant to be. It was meant to be like the step down process, but it just took over.
All the things we are mentioning is coming back to that one like blatant point is that as the years are going by, people are losing their moral compass, and this is becoming a huge problem where people cannot differentiate between what's right and wrong, what's needed and what's not needed. And these are like sort of principles that Islam, is built upon. that we don't, as a Muslim, we don't spend money on those things which have no benefit to us.
Mm.
And let's be honest, vaping doesn't bring you any sort of benefit. So if it doesn't bring you any benefit, there's more than likely that there is no goodness in that.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. But like, I think the other thing is sort of getting into like the underlying issues as well of these kind of substances. Why do people fall into them? So, first thing to mention is like these e-cigarettes and stuff, they tend to be flavored, right? And the whole point is the flavors are meant to be there so that it sort of like gives you that thing of, oh, it tastes nice, so I want to go back to it. But at the same time, it's also like exciting your dopamine levels as well, right? And dopamine, for those that don't know, is like a chemical that exists within the brain. It's called, as far as I know, it's called like the happy hormone or the happy chemical.
You get it from
Um,
eating chocolate, you get it
yeah,
from
yeah,
exercise, which is a bit more harder to release,
yeah, yeah,
and you get it from a lot of other stuff.
yeah. But essentially, like your dopamine levels get increased because of the chemicals that are inside of the e-cigs and other things which causes addictions as well, which basically excite the levels of dopamine within your body. And what's happening is that when them dopamines are being released, you're feeling good about yourself, which is why you keep coming back to it. But the problem is that the more dopamine, the more sort of you start off by taking, so for example, start off with e-cigs, your dopamine levels get excited, but then after that, there comes to a point where what you were taking or the amount that you were taking isn't enough to excite those dopamine levels. So therefore, you need to up your intake or you need to move on.
You need to change substance.
Yeah. Um, so that's what I want to get into now, right? The changing and flicking between substance X and Y, um, moving around, right? And we've seen it as we're growing up, and we're still fairly young, Kasim, right? I'm fairly sure our elder generation, they've seen so many different substances come and go from the market. I remember there were times like where like, was it plant fertilizers at one point that people were taking to get high?
You must have had some weird friends, but process.
Right. I'm fairly sure there was something about like some plant fertilizers are being used to get high or something, right? But there's also trends come and go,
Yeah.
right? And drugs and substances come and go. There was that thing about glue stick. Is it Pretty sticks or glue sticks?
Yeah.
Yeah. People used to sniff them.
Yeah.
Which could. It sounds so crazy, man. But the point we're trying to make here is that substances will come and go, come and go, come and go. The problem is that to identify a substance and to put it into a bracket of this is something that's not good for me. This is the issue that many people have. Is that, for example, if you say to like your average Muslim, you turn around and say to him, okay, what are your thoughts about um, a really heavy drug, heroin, for example? They're going to say to you, oh, no, it's not allowed, right? You ask them about alcohol. Alcohol is obvious one. Most people will turn around and say, no, you're not allowed to have that, right? Um, as you come more and more further down and come to drugs that are more and more prevalent, that line starts to get blurred.
Yeah.
But the principle that you're applying to heroin is not being applied to other substances. And that's what I'm trying to make the distinguishment about. We're not getting into like the ruling itself and the derivation of ruling. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you as part of your own moral compass and your own thinking process, that if there is a substance which is causing X or is causing these things to occur within my body and I refuse to take them, just because another substance exists, which is very widely prevalent, that a lot of people are using, um, but it's also causing harm to my body, why am I going to that? Like, doesn't make sense. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying making sense? Yeah. Okay.
So, what's the next substance we're talking about?
So I think the next substance that we're
Which
going
has
to
stood
talk
the
about,
test of time.
yeah, which has stood the test of time and regions and countries as well,
Yeah.
because it's so prevalent. Um, Next substance we want to talk about is weed, right? Marijuana, yeah,
Hash,
yeah.
whatever names you have for
Call
it.
call it what you like.
Bob
Right?
Marley.
Yeah. I don't know what. Let's start with you. I've talked a lot, man. I've not even got any water. I've not got any tea. Anything. I've had a long day at work as well. Come on.
Oh, but weed.
Yeah.
It's the thing is, it has its own culture.
Mm-hmm.
It has its own sort of community. There are people out there who honestly worship weed.
Mm.
They made it their god. They made it their, People say that there's no harm in weed. I've seen my own friends smoke weed
Hmm.
and smoke it to such an extent where now they don't even have the ability to use their own brain.
Mm.
So if you're gonna turn around and say to me that weed has no harm, it's only good for a person, I'm gonna say to you, no. Sorry, you can't convince me with that argument.
Mm.
The damage effects it has on people, even if you don't smoke it, if you just deal with it, you're with people who have it. I'm talking about the UK, the amount of youth which are involved in drugs, and
Mm.
most of the drugs which youth start to, how do you say, shot around or start to deal in, is weed.
Mm.
Why? Because it's small, comes in small bags. It's £10 a bag, £20, whatever, and it's very very easy. But this
Mm.
is the starter, and you see a lot of youth, they get hooked by this lifestyle of drug dealers and drugs and this and that, and eventually there's so many youth who even say to me that I'm involved in this, but I can't get out.
Mm.
I'm too deep now. I just can't get out. Imagine you say to a youth that quit your job of shotting weed and go work a normal job. He's going to say to you, mate, in an hour I earn what most people earn in a week. You
Mm.
know how hard that is to turn down or to turn away. But the huge implication that it's having on families, the fact that if you sell drugs to another kid and then you ruin his entire family, imagine the sort of like curses you get from their parents, the fact that you've ruined their entire family. Why? Because you want to make some money or you want to sell your drugs.
Mm.
I think it's a huge problem,
Yeah.
especially the Muslim youth are facing in this country.
So, like I said before, I think there's a very large following behind marijuana, and there are so many people who basically swear that marijuana does nothing to their
Yeah,
physical health, right? And that is a big problem, right? Um, I don't know if you saw recently, there was a clip that went around. Khabib came to the UK in it,
mm,
um, and he did like a host of interviews, and he did a lot over the weekend that he was here. There was one particular person that asked him a question about UFC being haram. Did you see it?
no, I don't see that.
You didn't see it. So basically, he was asked that question that do you think that the sport that you participated in, and I'm paraphrasing here, right? Do you believe that that is actually impermissible? And he turned around and he said, look, at the end of the day, this sport involves hitting people in the face. Um, it's not essentially that what he was trying to say was it's not something that's the something that a Muslim should be involved in. Okay, this guy has made his money in UFC, right? He made his fame in the UFC, right? He could have dodged the question, could have turned around and said, "Look, I don't want to answer that question," right? But if you watch the response, and I don't want to like sort of paraphrase. I'm trying to be very careful about what he said, but what he said was not to try and like back his
Justify.
own to justify. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He wasn't trying to justify. He was saying that look, what's halal is halal and what's haram is haram. I don't have a say in that.
I'm not
If
going to change the
yeah,
boundaries. I'm not
yeah,
going to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
If I've done something, okay, then that's on me as an individual. And I think this is really important that we all do things that are wrong, you know?
It's
Yeah,
a justification.
yeah. And you know when you justify something and you turn around and say, no, 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 this thing's all right, it's all right. That's where you're really causing problems. Okay. For there may be some people that are watching this and listening to this and who have an understanding that marijuana causes no problems and no harms. Your understanding and the way that you're viewing it, and because of your viewpoint, you will only allow yourself to confirm whatever you believe, right? I think I've talked about confirmation bias somewhere else as well. Um, and because your viewpoint is that it causes no harm, you will convince yourself that it causes no harm. And any evidence that comes in front of you that will support that argument, you take that as to be as your evidence. For example, right? You believe that marijuana causes no physical harm. You see a person that's been smoking weed for the last 10 years and he seems hunky dory, he's got a job, um, suit and tie, goes to work, earning 50, 60 grand a year, comes home, smokes weed basically every other day. Um, see that he's living in a nice house, he seems to be doing all right. Yeah. But what do you know about what's going through that guy's mental state? And this is the thing that the effect of marijuana, there are huge implications and there are studies that have been done talking about the mental effects of marijuana that occurs in terms of schizophrenia and psychosis, right? You don't see that. I don't see that. You know, if I pass somebody that's smoked a joint within the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, generally we can see it in their complexion, right? But somebody that smokes weed and been away, has had a sleep, whatever, refreshed and stuff, smokes weed regularly, we might not see it physically in terms of how they look, right? We may even have people that we know
Yeah.
that unfortunately are smoking weed, but what's going through their mind, and if you yourself are smoking, what's going through your mind and your mental state, and the questions that are and the voices that you're hearing, and what's going on inside of your mind, only you know. And let's be honest, most people don't want to talk about that and don't want to open up about that.
When you mentioned that there was a girl at work and she smokes weed just because it's one of her pastimes and hobbies.
Mm,
Obviously, nobody comes to work stoned. I hope they don't anyway.
mhm,
So every time she would hear just the name of the police or
mm,
sirens, she'd honestly she'd shiver.
mm,
Why? Because once she got caught with weed on her by the police,
mm,
and that how do you say it, paranoia
mm.
is gonna stay with her forever. Even
Yeah,
though she
yeah.
was in a normal state of mind,
Mm,
but that paranoia had built up. Why? Because she uses weed.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she's a substance abuser, and even though she's in a normal state, you may
Mm,
think she looks perfect. You talk to her, she's perfectly normal. Soon as she hears one noise, it all goes off. Her
mm,
mind, she can't get back to equilibrium.
mm. Yeah, yeah. This is known to be a big actually effect of marijuana, where it basically leaves a person in constant state of paranoia,
Yeah.
whether that be the police or anything. Like they're always looking over their back, walking down the street, and they're worried that he's looking at me or
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
looking at me, or they're not.
What if I get stopped?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so question is, Kasim, like you've talked about the police and this woman,
Yeah.
right? And she's scared of the police. There's a big drive at the moment within the country that marijuana should be legalized, right?
I'm just gonna laugh at that, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't even want to ask the question, what do you think? Because I already know what you think,
Yeah.
right? So why should it remain illegal? Other than like the obvious.
Why should it remain illegal? That's me to justify something which is like why
I know, it's a difficult
it's
question.
quite difficult, as you know what I mean.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
quite obvious the reasons why.
yeah.
But just look at the effects it's having on society, communities,
Mhm,
kids, families, people breaking relationships, stealing from their parents for drug money. Youth getting killed.
mm,
Why? Because they can't pay money or they're addicted to a substance, and so, you'd be the last one to advocate for his legality. This
mm,
is probably living in a world where it's just everybody's free, isn't it? And we probably might have episode on this. What is actual liberalism?
mm,
What is true freedom?
mm,
That's a different episode.
mm. I look forward to that one actually. That'll be a really interesting topic. But okay, so we've talked about like in terms of an individual basis, Kasim. Societally, what effects do these substances and the use of these substances and the buying and selling of these substances have? What are the impacts that we see in terms of our society?
Me personally, again, I see a lot of Muslim youth wasting their school lives,
Hmm.
wasting any talents they have. Even at school, mashallah, we saw like a lot of good guys. They used to be like very good at football, and you used
Mm,
to think, what, if these guys actually train hard and go join a club, or put their head down, they probably can make something of their life. But they got involved in drugs at 14, 15, and that was the end for it. That was the
mm,
end for them. A lot of people just becoming disillusioned with life, just taking drugs and just being in this constant state of wanting to feel happy. And I don't know, it probably comes from deeper problems, deeper underlying problems that we don't even know about. But no, I don't see any good from it, to be honest. It's having a negative effect on our community. How many parents complain that, look, our sons, they just do nothing.
mm,
They just come home and they just smoke weed and then they eat and then they go sleep and they go out. They've got no job. They don't can't get married or they don't even want to get married. It's just problems after problems.
hmm. Yeah, I think there's so many problems that it has within the society. Like you've mentioned about the youth and like a lack of drive, lack of ambition.
So,
Um, you become lethargic and lazy. You lose sight of what's important. I think the other thing is that because it's such a lucrative business as well, like monetarily, like you mentioned before, some of these people are earning what we earn in weeks and months. These guys earning it within a matter of hours, right? But the lifestyle is just
constantly looking over your shoulder. You
you
see so
know
many youth, I see youth driving around a brand new 70 plates or the 20
mm,
plates, whatever.
Yeah.
And like, it might be the one you thought that was done well, but majority you just know it's just drug money, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just and the thing is, all that success, all that money, it's all short lived anyway.
Mm,
First of all, there's no barakah in that money. Wallahi, there's no barakah.
mm,
Anything that you feed in is haram.
mm,
It's not even. How can it even be permissible? Second of all, and third of all, you're looking at your shoulder, you're in constant worry, you're in constant. It's not a life that a Muslim wants to live.
mm,
Alhamdulillah, you know what we earn, but what just like normal money. We're happy.
mm.
We get to eat every day with our families. We're at home. We're safe. We don't have anybody knocking on our doors. We just alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I think that's you saying that now. We don't have people knocking on our doors,
You know.
bro. Honestly,
You
like,
live a clean life. You have a clean heart. You're not looking at. You can walk on the street freely.
mm,
That's
yeah,
that's
you're not gonna have
respect.
somebody
That's
else saying, yeah,
you know.
yeah. But
This
there's,
is honestly that's one of the biggest blessings a person can have.
mm,
You know.
yeah. No, I agree. There's so many like other issues that stem from this as well, where because a person isn't in a neutral state, you know, especially when a person is under the influence of a substance, where their mind goes and where their actions lead them to, unfortunately, don't lead to anything good. You know, um, let's say, for example, a person is under the influence of a substance and anger overcomes them. Okay, anger is a natural thing, right? Um, there are benefits to it, and there are also harms to it as well. Okay, um, I think I give the example of if somebody was to break into your house and to get them to go out, anger would overcome you, and that is a positive effect. But at the same time, there are very very negative effects that can occur because of a person's anger, and the use of substances because they cloud the mind. Unfortunately, they don't allow a person to think about what they're doing in that particular instance, and they end up doing something which they later on regret.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, doesn't matter if they regret it; the action has already been done.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you wanted to give a couple of examples of that. Um, so examples around like domestic abuse, um, rape and assault, drink driving, things like that.
Yeah, it's. I think that's what we get on to next is alcohol.
Mm,
But yeah, one problem I find with the West, especially, we have there's a lot of problems here in the West. People
mm,
make the West out like it's some sort of magical land where everybody drives amazing cars in the air and all glass buildings and like there are a lot of problems here.
mm.
And
As there are everywhere, Kasim.
yeah, they're everywhere. Uh, and the thing is, we don't want to actually get rid of the problem. We just want to put a plaster over it.
Mm,
Look, we have alcohol in our society. It's how many non-Muslims will tell you that just over the week, how many people get into brawls, into fights? How many women get sexually assaulted? Even when people are not taking these drugs, like look in the past week of what's happened to like some women. It's terrible, isn't it? It's
mm,
look how many people die because of drink driving, like innocent lives who were just driving on the road going home, and because somebody was in the wrong state of mind for the wrong substance, and killed somebody.
mm,
Like if you can't see how damaging that is, then there's something wrong with your moral compass. There's something
mm,
wrong with you that you can't see the negative effects this happen on people.
mm,
I know it's so sad when I hear kids say to me, that, I don't have a father, and say, why? Because he's an alcoholic.
mm,
You just why choose to have kids and leave them?
mm,
So many problems that all these things are bringing. Domestic violence. The football, the Euros. Like how many, especially like on social media, saying that if England lose tonight, so like how many women will get beaten up? Domestic violence is on the rise. Even during lockdown, how many kids used to get beaten up? How many women that used to get beaten up? Why?
mm.
Because usually they go out to drink, but now they staying at home and drink, and then it leads to so many problems. It's just a sad state of affairs, isn't it?
Mm. I think, like you mentioned, this thing of like assault, um, physical, sexual assault.
It's all because a person's not in
Um,
the right state of mind.
yeah, yeah. Whilst we acknowledge that it's not always the case that based because they're under the influence of a substance, but we know that a large proportion of the assaults that take place, whether they be sexual, physical, or whichever nature they may be, um, unfortunately, it does come down to the use of substances and just being cloudy,
Yeah.
just not knowing.
You don't have control of your mind. Islam is a religion which allows us to be in equilibrium all the time.
Mm,
In every single state of our life, we know what's going on,
mm,
or we know how to act in every sort of position. We know what to do.
mm,
But once that mind is overpowered by something else, you lose control of them senses.
Mm.
Once you lose control of them senses, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, and it brings out like some sort of almost something else out. Something else after you comes out, and
Yeah.
it's sad. You know.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of people chase these kind of substances because they want to forget about what's happening in their life.
Yep.
You know, they don't want to deal with the problems face on, and this is a big issue. You know, like we'll talk about this in a future episode, talking about like communication and the way that we should deal with confrontation and deal with issues that exist. Because at the end of the day, no person's life is is without issues.
No.
You know, the ways come and go, things crash, things don't go the way that they need to. Whether that be as an individual, whether that be between you and your spouse, or whether that be between friends or family, whatever it may be. No person's life is without some sort of rocky nature. Um, but to go down the line of to use substances to forget about your problems is not the way to do it. And it's not going to solve any issues. On the other hand, it's actually going to make your issues worse. And I think that's what we need to sort of put across. There does need to be a drive for higher powers, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not just me and you as individuals, but organizations that, alhamdulillah, there are some really good organizations doing a lot of work. But these organizations also need like funding and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It needs to come from the government, basically not making any excuses. A couple of weeks back, I don't know if you saw it. There was a clip going around of a disabled person, who basically he's gone up to Jacob Rees-Mogg from the Conservative Party, and he's saying, you took my job away from me.
Yeah.
And he was disabled. He had cerebral palsy, and he was working as a youth worker. And basically, the Tories shut down a lot of the youth work that was taking place. And you see, these kind of initiatives, they help to deal with the problem. Chucking somebody in jail and slamming the bars behind them is not a way in which we are going to rectify our society. Marginalizing these people, putting them away, locking them away and saying, you're going to spend 15 years, 20 years, that's not going to teach a person to come good or to come clean. We need to have better initiatives, inshallah, that help these people.
Yeah.
I did say at the start of the episode as well that I don't want to talk about the person that's coming down from higher substances coming down. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we close this episode?
If there is anybody who's involved in like any sort of like drugs and this stuff, first of all, we all need to realize that first of all, there's something wrong.
Mm.
You need to come head on with facts and reality. You need to admit, and then you need to seek help.
Yeah, definitely.
You need to first understand that what I'm doing is not, and it's not good for me. It's not good for my immediate people around me. And it's not good for the society at large. The person that I'm hurting the most is myself first and foremost. Once you realize that, then you can be helped. But if you don't come to facts with reality, you cannot be helped. And if people do need help, then reach out to us. Send us an email. We'll hopefully send you in the right direction to somebody or organizations that we know, or ask in your local area. But people need to seek help if they are involved in drugs and stuff. It's nobody's fault. That forget about why you got involved or how you got involved. Just make now the focus on recovery and getting out of that.
Yeah. I think if you are involved in terms of like dealing and basically this is your form of livelihood as well. Like you mentioned before, that there is no barakah in things like this. There's no way to live your life. So I know that it's a big pull. I know that because that kind of money, you're probably never going to see that kind of money again in your life. It's very rare for somebody to come away from that sort of situation and end up earning just as much, if not more, than what they were. But the thing is, not only are you destroying your own life, you're destroying the lives of many, many other people. And like you mentioned before, you lose sight of that. You become desensitized. You don't think about it in that way anymore. But sometimes, like, I'm a person, and my wife will tell you, Kasim, that I'm not the kind of person that dwells on the what ifs, or what if in the future it happens like this. My perspective has always been, you deal with an issue as and when it comes, and you don't. And Islam teaches us this, that we don't think about what happened previously. We don't say about what if I did it like this in the past, or what if this particular thing happened. No, we don't work in that sort of situation. But yeah, like, don't think about what's going to happen in the future. Just work on rectifying what's here and now. Um, so we'll call the episode to an
Yeah,
end, inshallah.
leave it there, inshallah.
Yeah. I think this is quite a heavy episode as well. There's definitely more to unpack in this
Yeah.
topic.
There's lots of we
Um,
didn't even mention that we want to mention as well.
yeah. Just to, like, they're talking about how addictions work, what kind of things that we can be addicted to. We've done the episode on social media and stuff.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same principles, Kasim, isn't it? Talking about addiction and dopamine releases and becoming desensitized to that amount of dopamine and you wanting more and more and more. It's all sort of going into the bunching up and going into the same bracket. But yeah, I think we need to all look into like cleaning our lives,
Yeah.
sorting out our moral compasses, myself and yourself first
Yeah.
and foremost. We have issues as well. But yeah, let's leave it there, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Jazakallahu khair for listening to today's episode. Please do subscribe to follow our journey and to keep up with the content that we're producing. Jazakallahu khair for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.